Hi. Checking the news on my phone. The news, media, television, newspapers, Facebook, Instagram, take your pick. It's all over the place in our world. And it is also all over the place in the My Hero world. So I kind of wanted to do a video where I talk about kind of the way that media is used and how it's portrayed in My Hero Academia, how it's used by the heroes, how it's used by the public, how it's used by the villains, and just kind of compare that, to different things. So a good comparison actually is comparing the way that media is used in My Hero Academia to the way that it's used in, One Piece, where we have Morgans, Big News Morgans, who is this, he's the he has the monopoly on all of the newspapers pretty much that are distributed all over the world. Yes, some smaller islands, some islands have like their own newspapers and stuff like that, but generally it's through the World Economic Times or the Economic Journal, whichever you want to call it, is where most of the One Piece world gets their news from. And that's become a very big thing that's very obvious in several of the newer chapters and stuff like that in regards to stuff that's going on with Egghead and what happened with Wano and how that got reported to the rest of the world. In My Hero Academia, we have kind of the opposite situation, where with Morgans, he's the one that can control the flow of this type of information and stuff like that. And he can sensationalize the stories as much as he wants. Whereas with My Hero Academia, there's dozens, hundreds of different media outlets and everything like that. There's newspapers, there's, anything you want you can access on your phone and get information that way. There's television, there's, blogs and the videos that can pop up. And everybody in My Hero Academia, almost everybody has probably a smartphone that they can just pull out and grab anytime there's a villain attack and just be like, oh, look, I'm going to film this villain attack or whatever. And like the heroes show up and save everybody, hopefully. And so you see a lot of that in My Hero Academia. And so, examples of this are, the media, reporters, and whatever show up at almost every single time that there's an encounter between a hero and a villain. There's a robbery that happens. The hero shows up and starts taking care of it, and then the media shows up. And, they get statements from the people who got robbed. They get statements from the heroes and everything like that to either assure the public or send out a warning to the public if the villain got away, so they can inform the public that, oh, the villain escaped and this is what they look like and we're on, keeping an eye out for them and stuff like that. And so there's those types of things. And then also there's this whole concept within the My Hero Academia world where, in comparison to stuff that's in like DC and Marvel, where in My Hero Academia, most of the heroes have their public identity. Their hero name is their public identity. And a lot of people, a good chunk of everybody knows who their, a good chunk of the heroes have like their real name as part of what they are and stuff like that. Like everybody knows that, Endeavor is Enji Todoroki. And everybody knows who a lot of the other top 10 heroes, like what their real names are and stuff like that. In other cases, there's much less known ones where like All Might kept his identity as Toshinori Yagi separate from his identity as All Might. So there's those moments. There's other moments where we see that like Izuku does not recognize Aizawa right off the bat because Aizawa is one of these underground heroes. He's not one of the people that has his name in the spotlight all the time. That's not the type of hero he is. Where on the other hand, you have Present Mic, who is very much this, he's this public DJ, has this big public persona and everything like that. And he's also a hero. Same thing with Midnight. And, a lot of the other teachers that are at UA have these public and private personas that are, yes, I have my job at UA and I have my job where I'm a hero and stuff like that. And yes, those cross. And in the media, that's what they're referred to as. It's not a hidden it's not like a secret that, Guard Dog, I think that was his name, Hound Dog is, he's the counselor at UA, but he's also this hero and such. So we see these instances where we have the public personas and the, secret identity personas which really aren't a huge thing in My Hero Academia because it's such this amazing thing to be a hero. Whereas, take, DC, for example, Superman has Clark Kent that very few people know that that's who Superman actually is. Same thing with Bruce Wayne in Batman. Um, you know, Wonder Woman is Diana Prince is generally what her name is, in regards to her secret identity, along with, a bunch of the other ones. Whereas with Marvel, for example, stuff that we see in Marvel all the time is, everybody knows at the end of the first movie that, Tony Stark is Iron Man. And all of this other stuff. Natasha and Clint went from being, Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton, who were, ended up becoming these public, they were these assassins and spies for S.H.I.E.L.D. And now they're these public personas of Black Widow and Hawkeye and stuff like that. But that's not what this is. I went down a different path. That's not what this video is about. This video is about how media is used in My Hero Academia. And how the media is portrayed both as a character in and of itself, because we have several characters throughout the series that are recurring characters that deal with the media and stuff like that. And I'll get to them in a little bit. But other instances we see is one of the things that we see very early on in the series, within a couple of the first, within like the first chapter and within like the first 2 episodes, is where we see Izuku as this little kid watching the footage of All Might, where he's saving all of these people. And where Izuku is just awestruck by this because, All Might is his favorite hero and he can watch these clips again and again. And we also see how this does affect Izuku in the fact that after he gets the diagnosis of being quirkless, he is exceedingly worried that he can't be like All Might anymore, that he can't become this hero anymore. So we see all of this, there's like footage of like so many of the different fights that All Might has been in ever since he debuted all the way up until now and stuff like that. And we see that a lot throughout the course of the series and stuff like that, that there's, they reference this fight or that fight or this fight. Whereas one of his largest fights in the entire series, which is him versus All For One, that is like the first time that they fight, where he actually, supposedly thought he defeated All For One and stuff like that. Where he supposedly thought he defeated him, that was not news to the public. That was just completely, no one knew about that, minus him, Night Eye, a few of his other direct associates, like, Recovery Girl and Nezu and a few others, and I think a couple of people probably within the Safety Commission knew about this, but not very many, it wasn't known to the public that this happened. Even a bunch of the other top 10 heroes didn't even know that happened until it was revealed later. But then also at the beginning of the series, we have these moments where we have, Mount Lady showing up within, the first villain fight is technically involves Mount Lady and Kamui Woods and Death Arms and stuff like that, showing up and taking down, the villain. And then, the paparazzi instantly show up at this and they start taking pictures of Mount Lady. And she's, completely using it to her advantage because this is her debut as a hero. And of course, having a very good public image through the media, having the media on your side can be very helpful for that. And, we see how the, different ones want to use this, you want to get good airtime, you want to be, popular and that type of stuff. And that's how you kind of, helps you with moving up and down in the ranks of, the top 10 hero rankings and the top 100 and everything. And so we see a lot of that. We also see throughout the course of the series, we know that All Might has done various interviews, not just where it's, an interview after an incident, but also interviews where he's on like talk shows and stuff like that. It's like in our world, we have talk shows where people come on and talk about their latest movie or their latest book or, a political campaign or, their latest CD if they're a musician or whatever. And, they come on and they talk about that. And in the My Hero world, it's probably they have the same thing where they have, people come on and talk about that stuff, but they also have heroes come on the shows and talk about like, oh, there was this funny story that happened. And, oh, yeah, the last time I had to work with insert whatever name of other hero here. Oh, yeah, it went great. Well, we had a little bit of a rocky start, but it ended up fine. The general types of things you see that happened on, talk shows and stuff like that, which is a part of the media because that is a part of this public persona that helps disperse information about the heroes. And that's stuff that the public sees. And also going in this, there's also when the media finds out that All Might is teaching at UA, there's this whole thing where it's like they have all, the media at the front gate of the school and they're trying to get inside, and there's the female reporter that's trying to interview all of the different kids about having All Might as a hero, and then Eraserhead Aizawa just shows up and like shoos them away and closes the gates on them, which is just funny. And they're like, well, we have the right to know what's going on about this. We have the right to know that All Might is teaching here. I'm like, well, technically it is a private institution, so technically I don't think you do, but And the flip side of that, where we have like all this information about the heroes, there's also the information about the villains. And one of the villains that uses, not intentionally necessarily, but as an aftermath of what they did, was Stain, where, Stain, hero killer and everything like that. He's taken out several heroes at this point in time, has either killed them or at the very least paralyzed them in the case of what happens with Tensei and such. And, he just had this battle with him and Shoto and Izuku and Ida and stuff and such, and he was taken down, Stain was taken down. And then there ends up this moment where he does save Izuku from one of the Nomu, which is a whole other reason why he did it, but he saved Izuku from one of the Nomu, and then throughout the course of figuring out who Stain was, like once the media gets a hold of him and once the police officers are able to catch him and, get more information out of him and identify who he actually is, they are able to determine, oh, this is his actual identity. And then like his doctrine is like found and it's released online and ends up getting distributed. Not necessarily because the media wanted to distribute it, but it got out and people like Toga and Spinner and Dobby saw it, along with several of the other ones that became members of the League of Villains, what were they called? The League of Villains. I don't remember. It was like that first little batch of the heroes with Mustard and Moonfish and Muscular and all of them. Vanguard Action Squad. That's what it was. Sorry. Have them. And, Spinner is very much, compelled by what he saw because, he was very much influenced by everything that he saw Stain talk about in that regard. And that has led Spinner to where he is now, also has led Toga to where she is now. And I'll get to Dobby and his use of the media in a little bit, in regards to what happens, when he released his identity and everything. But, so it can be used in good ways and bad. And then we also have, this, the moment where All Might's final battle is broadcast live as it's happening, between him and All for One. And, this battle gets broadcast and, they save Bakugo and everything, but it's revealed to the world, not just Japan, but the world, that what All Might's form is, that he actually has this weak form and that he is actually barely able to fight anymore. But he still, he still stands tall and he still defeats him and is able to take down his enemy. But, we know in the long run that's not exactly what happens. But, at that moment, to the world and to Japan, he represented that he was able to do that. And so we see a lot of that. We also see different heroes giving press conferences at various points in time. We know that Aizawa and Vlad King and Nezu did a press conference after Bakugo was kidnapped from the training camp. We know that they did a press conference about that, and such. So, having to answer to the press is something that happens. We see that happen in Marvel and stuff like that with different, heroes. Same thing in DC when things happen with that, with those heroes. And we see it happen today when, stuff happens with like police officers and stuff like that, where there's different, press conferences that get held after an incident happens, where they explain what they found out about the victim or about the perpetrator or whatever. And we see that all the time. And other things that happen is we see this with Gentle, with Gentle's Criminal and La Brava, where, he goes and he films his, little escapades and stuff like that. And then he puts them up online. And, him and La Brava are trying to use that to make, like, popularity and stuff like that for him, but it doesn't really work. So we have those moments that happen there where he's trying to make himself big in the media by doing it that way, but it's not really going the way that he wants, which of course leads to him trying to get into UA and during this cultural festival, which doesn't end well for him. Although now I like the fact that they're giving Gentle and La Brava like a second chance at this point in time, which I really like. I'm really glad that they're doing that because they deserve it. In my opinion, they're one of the villains that deserve it. But going into that, also on the side of like how the villains use it, we have Curious from the Metal Liberation Army, who is, her job is she is a journalist, and she wrote like this new book to try to increase the popularity of the Metal Liberation Army and such. So she is both a reporter and an author. And we also know that she went and did a whole bunch of investigative journalism basically about Toga to try to gain as much information as she could. And then she uses that to taunt Toga when she is fighting her, which ends up turning into a bad idea because Curious ends up dead, as I went over in her video. But, she uses that to her advantage. And then also that same book, or one of the same books that is connected to the Metal Liberation Army, they use through Hawks to have like Hawks try to like increase the popularity of like this movement. So that way, like his fans who just adore him, will be like, oh, well, I saw Hawks reading this book and maybe I should try it. I saw these videos and images of Hawks, let the motorcycle go past, of Hawks, reading this book, and I was just like, oh, well, I'll give it a try. And, there's some interesting ideas in here and stuff like that. So that is a very good way of using, the number three hero, whatever Hawks was at the time. I don't remember. You could use number 3 at that point in time. But using, these top rank hero as a way to like promote your own agenda through the media. And that is also stuff that gets done today, where you have people that have like, product endorsements and stuff like that of like, I drink this type of beer, I drink this type of pop, or I use this type of, these clothes, or this, that, or I drive this car, or I have this watch, or whatever. And it's the same thing that happens today. It's just these are heroes using it. So it's still product placement and merchandising and stuff like that. And we, of course, have these other instances where later on, we have the moment where, like, Class 1A is having to learn more about the media because after what happens with Shoto and Bakugo, where they end up having, like, that disastrous interview after they get their licenses and they stop the villains, they end up having the disastrous interview that makes Shoto look good, and then just has very angry Bakugo in the corner, which is just hilarious. And so they bring in Mount Lady, and she, of course, does this like little hero course class with them about the media and like teaches them how to deal with being interviewed, and helps some of them get more confident in it and stuff like that. And then, of course, I made the comments around the way that they made Izuku look like he's made of like Legos, or like it was an Izuku made in like Minecraft, and he can barely move, which I just found hilarious. It's just so funny. But there's that, and like, I think it was Mount Lady that made the comment that the media is a very good outlet for heroes to be able to use, because it helps civilians recognize your face, and it helps them with being able to understand that they can associate you with being safe. That if you're there to try to help them. And, or at least that's a good association to go along with this for why it's important to make sure that you have a good public image. Regardless of how high up in the church you are, as long as you have a decent public image, that's going to help you with having people trust you more. And, having the media on your side is a very good way of doing that. Bakugo does not care about having the media on his side, whereas Izuku is terrified with it, whereas some of the other ones understand that it's a good idea to make sure that you have, the media as, as an ally to a degree. Or at the very least, they're not going to be running a huge amount of negative stories about you. Also, it just means you have to be very careful with how much information in regards to, your personal life and stuff like that gets leaked into the media, which we'll get to with the Todoroki family in a minute, but with everything that happened there. But, she, Mount Lady is trying to help them understand this, that it is an important thing to be able to have this good image in in the public. And that's why they did the media class, because that's like, you have to be able to handle the media. It's like, you're going to get interviewed after you take down a villain or after you save someone from a burning building or something like that. You're most likely going to be interviewed. And no, those clips may not get played all over the world or all over Japan even. They may barely be on the local news. Excuse me. They may just end up being on the local news depending on like where you are and how big of an incident this was and stuff. But it's still important for you to be able to know how to handle being interviewed by the media. And that's what that was about. And I wanted to do a video about this for a while now, but I finally got around to it because of what happened in the most recent chapter of My Hero Academia, which I'll get to. But first, let's talk about what Dabi did. So, during the, during kind of like part of the climax of the battle with Gigantomachia and everything that happens with, Endeavor and Shoto and Dabi and everything that happens there, during the battle of, with Jaku Hospital and everything in there where they're fighting against the Metal Liberation Army, we have this moment where, of course, Dabi has timed it with Skeptic to then release this pre-recorded video and release it into the world. And Skeptic is, of course, one of the other members of the Metal Liberation Army, and he is very good at like controlling media and stuff like that. And like him and Curious were probably very good at being able to figure out stories and stuff like that that were good to run to show either Detronat or the other companies that were associated with them in a good light, to try to improve their public image. And Skeptic releases the video that is Dabi, that he pre-recorded and gave to Skeptic, along with the footage of Hawks killing twice, getting put in the, adding in that, image, those images as well. And it's, Dabi revealing his true identity as Toya Todoroki, that he is the eldest son of Endeavor, of, Enji Todoroki, and how he airs basically all of their dirty laundry at that moment, and it's broadcast everywhere. We see the reactions of Rei and of Natsuo and Fuyumi as they watch, as not only are they finding out that A, Toya is not dead, B, he's a villain, and C, he just wants to watch the world burn. And at the same time, this is when, when Dabi is revealing this to Shoto and Endeavor and everything. So we get those moments. And we just see how much this, just what Dabi did, tears apart the faith that the public had in heroes. And, this is already kind of starting to deteriorate at times with what happens with what happened with All Might. At times, parts of it are like an all-time high with as much faith as they have in heroes, but it's also they're scared because All Might's not around anymore to be able to protect them. They're angry at All Might. They're angry at the other heroes and all this other stuff. And of course, everything that just happened during the battle with the Paranormal Liberation Army just makes it even worse. And, aftermath of that, there's one of the reporters that ends up like hounding Endeavor and Hawks and Best Jeanist about what happened. And she's like, my mother got, hurt because of all of this, or she could have been hurt because of all of this because she was there when all of this happened and everything. And, all this other stuff. And Endeavor, I don't think, blames her for the fact that she's angry, but he's also like, yes, I understand that this is an issue that happened. Yes, I understand that what I have done is wrong, but it's also just exceedingly hard to be able to get past that, because it's like there's a lot of more pressing issues right now, like taking care of these villains, getting All for One taken care of and Shigaraki taken care of and getting them either locked up or destroyed or neutralized or whatever you want to go with. Same thing with getting rid of Dabi, and along with the other villain, League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army, Paranormal Liberation Army that are still out there. We still have to get those people taken care of. Also, there's all these other villains that got released that need to be taken care of as well. So we have those moments also when the Todoroki family are heading on their way inside of the hospital to go and visit Shoto and Endeavor. They're just being hounded and assaulted verbally by the paparazzi and the people that are the protesters that are outside the hospital at that point in time. And they're just going there to visit their father and their brother, who are exceedingly very, very badly injured in this battle. And they don't have much to do with what was going on with what happened with Dabi in that regard. It's like, technically, it's none of the media's business where Todoroki, where Fuyumi works, or that Rei is in the hospital, or that, Natsuo is at school. Technically, that's none of their business in regards to the fact that that is a private matter. But there's also the whole thing of, like, how much of it is actually should be public knowledge, and the fact of, like, how abusive Endeavor was to his children and to his wife, and the fact that his treatment of them caused Rei to snap and made Rei hurt Shoto in that regard, and then that she's been at the hospital, in the mental ward for the last however many years, 10, 8, whatever number of years ago it was that she's been there. And yes, that is Endeavor's fault, and to a degree, yes, this is a domestic abuse case that is going on here, and that is something that does need to be taken into account. But and that's why the media is trying to report on it and stuff, and how tarnishing that is to Endeavor's image. And no, him being a hero doesn't take away from that, clearly, but it all depends on where that's all going to end up landing once everything's taken care of with this final battle that is currently happening. Which leads me into what is going on in this most recent chapter. So, yes, we got everything with Shinzo and Gigantomachia and everything that's going on with that, with Gigantomachia being angry at All for One, that he basically abandoned him several times and stuff. So we have those moments. But then we also have, like, the second half of the chapter where we see these two female reporters that we've met a couple of times. One of them is the one that had initially interviewed the students at various points in time. Another one is this other one that had, like, been very aggressive with Endeavor at the press conference. And we see them, they're both in their helicopters with their respective cameramen, and they're both filming or getting ready to film this battle that is going on with the UA students and the heroes and everybody else against, Shigaraki and All for One and the villains and Dabi and all this other stuff that's happening. And they're filming it. And they're like, we've shown all these other hero battles. And, this is showing the world that our heroes have not given up yet, that they are not beaten yet, that the heroes of Japan are not finished, and that they are going to do everything they can to try to stop this threat from spreading in further in our own country and from spreading to other countries. And the dark-haired female reporter that we've seen a couple of times, she says in the chapter that, it was so surreal to figure out that this hero running around in the tattered hero costume was actually a UA student, and that she had actually interviewed Izuku before, and that was interviewing him when he had been, first at UA and stuff like that, and probably found the footage of him when he saved, was trying to save Kacchan from the slime villain and everything, the sludge villain, and, when All Might showed up there. And we get, like, that callback there, and how she's like, I need to do this because I need to, show this to the world. And both female reporters, who are probably from rival stations or from rival news sources or whatever, are both there for the same reason. But there's several reporters that we see throughout the course of the series. One of them is, and I'm gonna mispronounce the guy's name. I apologize. He's the one that we always see like on the newscast with like the big horn on one side and like chopped off horn on the other. And it's Daikaku Miyagi, and he is the newscaster, and daily news and recent events and stuff like that. We see him around a lot. His quirk is called Big Horn, and he has two big horns, and one of them, because of the fact that it blocks the screen, he chopped it off, which I'm just like, oh boy, that's dedication to your job there. And we see him several times throughout the course of the series. And then there's the dark-haired female reporter that I mentioned, that we see her pop up quite a bit throughout the course of the series. And then one of them that they made up for the filler stuff, which I'm perfectly fine with. It was like for one of the first episodes back from at the beginning of one of the seasons. It was like the beginning of like season 3 or 4. I don't remember which. I think it was 4. And there's the reporter Tano Tokuda. And he is this freelance journalist who is working for Juzo News. And he is, that's a magazine publisher, probably like a gossip magazine and stuff like that. It's like People or Us or Time or whatever you want to go with. And, he goes and his intention initially is to try, he says, it's just like, I'm going to try to figure out who like the successor for One for All, who All Might is. And he does figure out that it's Izuku, which is kind of sad that this guy who's been around the kids for less than a day figured out that it's Izuku. But, he figures that out, but he's not malicious or anything like that. And his quirk is called like full body lens or whole body lens, where he can produce all these different camera lenses out of his body. His eyes can become a camera lens. He can make a camera lens appear out of his hand or different places on his arm. So he can get all these great, photos and everything like that. And he's a made up character. He, technically they're all made up, but he's a non-canon character in the fact that like he's canon in the anime, but he's not from the manga. But, he's like this good version of a reporter that we see. And, we've seen other news reporters and newscasters and stuff like that pop up throughout the course of the series and stuff. But those are some of the main ones that I wanted to highlight. But the quote that I wanted to leave you on, that is like, it's this quote that's at the end of the most recent chapter. And it's being said by, I think it's by the white-haired female reporter that we haven't seen very much of, as she's like watching this fight that's happening between Izuku and Shigaraki, and like all the rest that's going on there in that in the fight. And she's like, Izuku Midoriya isn't alone on the battlefield, even though they saw their comrades give up and walk away. Some of them have chosen to stand and fight because they're heroes. It's been reported in many countries that Japan has been defeated, but there are still people here who haven't given up. We're here to tell that story, and that's what we'll do. Regardless of whether we win or lose, every day the world seems smaller and more connected. So let's record this. Let's record what happens next and show it to this small world. They need to know that it's not over yet. And I love that they're doing that. I love that they're showing this, that, they're broadcasting this to the world. And yes, that whole concept of like, our world seems smaller and more connected every single day. That is a very apt description of like our world itself, where, we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have Snapchat, we have insert name of whatever other media, photo sharing, whatever thing. You get news from the other side of the world at the tips of your fingers in a matter of seconds. Or, read however many newspapers from around the world, so easily. You can have friends on the other side of the planet. And, it's this whole concept that, I see it as like a double version of a commentary. It's a commentary on what's going on in the My Hero world, but it's also a commentary on what's going on now. And the fact that, so much of the media also focuses on all of the bad things that happen in the world. And yes, those should be shown, but we also need to focus more on showing so many of the good things that happen in the world as well. The good moments, the things that show that humanity is not beaten down yet. And that is literally what's going on in this fight right now, is the fact of these are the students and the heroes and the villains that are working with them in the case of Gentle and La Brava, former heroes that are working with them, and Lady Nagant, that are all working with them together to try to take down Shigaraki and the villains and all of these other ones that are just causing nothing but havoc and trying to fix what was broken. And by doing that, you do have to broadcast to the world that this is what is happening. And I love that they're showing that in those chapters. And we saw it a little bit in one of the previous chapters where we saw a bunch of, I think they're like the business course hero students or whatever, that are there and they're filming what's going on because their intention is to also show this to the world. And La Brava is filming what's going on with Gentle being the hero and stuff like that. And all this other stuff. It's like, yes, these moments are important to see because it is a way of showing to the world that, yes, there's all this bad stuff that these villains have done, but there are so many people, so many students and so many heroes that are, yes, they've been beaten down. Yes, they've watched some of their colleagues leave. Mirko is missing an arm and a leg at this point in time. Izawa is missing an eye and a leg and all this other stuff. And they're still fighting. They're still doing everything they can. And that is what the media is trying to show. That is what those reporters are trying to show in that moment. And I'm really hoping that that gets brought up again in the next couple of chapters with like showing the aftermath of what happened in this fight. And I got a little riled up there and I'm sorry, but that was what I wanted to point out. That was what I wanted this video to be about, in the fact that journalism and media can be used in very different ways, not just in, you know, in My Hero or in One Piece, but also in our world, and how it's used. Regardless of what media outlet you're from, you should try to use it for good. Yes, bad things happen in the world, and yes, those need to be known about, but we also need to know more about the good things that are happening. The people that are striving to make things better, regardless of what they get out of it, because it's the right thing to do. So that's what we have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is not going to be the only My Hero Academia video that's coming up in the next couple of days, because this is going to come up the week just before Easter. So that Sunday, I am going to have a video where my Easter video is going to actually be about Mirko from My Hero Academia, where I talk about her. So another My Hero Academia video coming up. But that's what I have. So I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.